My name is William Idrissi, and I'm head of partnerships at Octopus Networks. We build out robust app chains for people on the shards of Near Protocol, as well as I'm the founder of the Nearverse, which is a explore to earn metaverse built on Near Protocol with Human Guild.
Yo.
Oh, hi. Sure. How's it going? Hi, I'm Kanan. I'm the founder of Stardust. We're a software platform for games building in the metaverse. Easiest way to think about us is a REST API that is backed by the blockchain. You pick up a sword in game, the game developer tells us you've just acquired an NFT in game, and we go mint it into your managed wallet on chain. So we're kind of a full stack solution for games looking to manage between 1 to 10 plus million monthly active users.
I'm Joe from GamerJibe, and GamerJibe is a metaverse as a service platform, and we help organizations create really branded experiences, and we're starting to integrate some Web3 technologies and think about NFTs in an interesting way, and that's something that I can talk about further. We're actually hosting the virtual component of East Denver on our platform, so if you have any team members or anyone at home who wants to visit or check out the different sponsors, they can do so at GamerJibe. eastdenver.gamerjibe.com.
Are we just supposed to keep speaking? Cool. So, our thesis on, I'll just keep going. On blockchain and games, I think it's important to note a lot of people think NFTs are really cool and so they should be in games. We kind of go from the opposite angle. Games over time, and as we've seen in the past few years, are trending toward open economy and MMO. So games like Roblox, Rec Room, Minecraft, even older games like RuneScape, World of Warcraft, EVE Online. What blockchain does is it's not a requirement for an open economy, but what it does is it globalizes and supercharges an open economy, and it's where these games are headed. And so you can have things like REITs and games, interoperability between them, and blockchain is a core facilitator of that, and NFTs are just the unique digital asset value that you earn by spending time, effort, and putting skill into these games. And that's kind of our thesis surrounding why games should be using blockchain. It's not just a cool technology, but it really takes your game to the next level and globalizes it and makes it part of a broader economy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When it comes to games, we really get to look at digital communities. And being able to understand digital communities and how they can be connected with blockchain is very similar to trying to figure out how to connect with physical communities. So I think that blockchain is, I really believe that the internet has connected us all already, yet we can't really trust each other immediately. And I think that blockchain is going to allow us to form legitimate tribes in the form of video game guilds or Dows or what have you. And I believe that that's going to be one of the more powerful things that blockchain has given us, actually far more powerful than tokens and coins that we're very excited about so far.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to different perspectives about the metaverse, there's certainly a lot of organizations and games coming out integrating blockchain in unique and interesting ways, play-to-earn models, etc. But I think what's really important is also defining a better way for people to meet and connect online using these technologies. And NFTs, as you guys, many of you know, they have certain properties that make them especially useful in metaverses. And I think that when it comes to providing utility with these NFTs in these type of metaverse environments, and that is essential because Web3, as much as how hype it is, how excited we are, and how much money is flowing through the system, is ultimately how do we make people's lives better, and how can we enable better connections online.
Awesome. Play to earn. Next topic. So from that perspective, I think we kind of see play to earn as this umbrella and fit a lot of things into it that I think are distinct. There are probably 3 distinct verticals that I see under play to earn. The first, as we know it today, is probably the globalization of work in a digital domain, which is why we see people in Southeast Asia playing these games. It's just work time arbitrage. As we take physical products to be made in China, we're taking our game time and actually outsourcing it to a kind of the third world in order to kind of consume it in the first. The second is I don't think anyone would be playing for money in the US, but rather they're playing to maybe have a stronger sense of ownership on what they're creating. And that's kind of the earn component there. So you create something unique in Roblox, let's say, for example, it's truly yours, and that's your sense of earn. And then I think the third component in the third vertical is it's actually a new source of revenue for game developers, where they can actually make revenue off people playing their game, earning unique value within it, and potentially even as something as simple as a secondary market royalty, actually get recurring revenue as a game developer. And those are kind of the three verticals that I see within Play to Earn.
Yeah, I love Play to Earn. I think that what we did is we created a new marketing concept, I guess. It's Play to Earn, but we call it Explore to Earn, where you're able to move one tile and then we have a contract that mints a new token. And if you're moving on your land or public land, you're able to get that. But if you're moving on someone else's land, then you have to share 50-50% with the owner of that land. So what I really love about that is that it aligns interest with the land owners and me, the game developer. We both want to farm user attention, right? We both want to own amazing lands and have NFT museums or concerts or all sorts of things that will help people be able to get more activity on their land. And I believe that a lot of blockchain contracts are just that. Being able to align interests together is a very powerful medium. So Play to Earn, Explore to Earn, all of these new gaming concepts, I think are just going to kind of teach us about how digital communities want to connect with each other in general. Why can't we have Explore to Earn at ETH Denver? Why can't we have different types of incentive alignments within our own companies and our own Dows, right? So I honestly think that having a simulation, which is the virtual world or metaverse, however you want to call it, where we can sort of see that and test it out, will ultimately lead us to smarter contracts and different types of organization in the real world that we're going to benefit from.
Yeah, some really good points made. I think ultimately there's a common theme of enabling individuals to be empowered to be able to not only make money, but to make their own decisions utilizing the blockchain. And I think that's something that's really important when it comes to the metaverse. So I think another component that's really important that we're starting to see now is a lot of brands, especially these, and you probably heard news around different fashion organizations starting to integrate interesting marketing and branding experiments inside the metaverse. And I think that we're going to start to see the metaverse as another channel for marketers and organizations to directly connect with consumers. And that in itself, I think, is really exciting for whether a company is building a game with a play-to-earn model, or whether it's for a connectivity software or some other based metaverse.
Awesome. I guess I'd like to pose a question to my fellow panelists. What is your biggest thought on interoperability of game items between games? Have you seen anything you guys like? And I guess where do you think it's going in the future?
I'll take that. I would love to, interoperability, I think, is why Vitalik created Ethereum, right? He didn't like that World of Warcraft could shut down his digital items, and it was a centralized thing. So I believe that that's going to be at the heart and core of it. We believe in a multi-metaverse. We believe in portals. We believe in wallets that can track your digital assets throughout the metaverse, as well as throughout web pages or Web3. All of these different things we think gamers are absolutely going to want. And I also want to be able to have a quest when it comes to interoperability. I want people to have to visit other players' games or other things, because WAGMI, like if you're an influencer online, having a collab with another influencer is not detrimental. It actually helps both of you. So I think that the game developers and the game arenas are going to learn that lesson of collaboration and really want to have that interoperability throughout their games.
Yeah, again, I would just add that interoperability enables NFTs in particular to extend their value beyond the source platform into other platforms within the ecosystem. And that, I think, speaking to all these NFT projects that are popping up, it's more than just a PFP, it's more than just hype. How can we enable individuals to own these NFTs and actually utilize them in other platforms and applications? And I think that's a trend that we're going to start seeing over the next few years.
Oh, thanks, and I guess my opinion on that is, and great points made, is that the most interesting thing about transient IP is that it exists long past the game. So if you look at games, usually the IP is connected to the game. If you can have a transient IP that exists in a broader world, you can actually have a source of revenue as a game developer that's tied to the IP. Instead, your game can shut down, but the community is really built around IP, not the game itself. The game is just an experience for that intellectual property and that community. And so I guess, kind of switching gears and looking at, you mentioned about interoperability between games and the broader different chains. Vitalik's mentioned recently how he doesn't think bridges are the future necessarily. And so how do you think, in an ideal world, information or data would go across chains?
Well, as a developer, as someone that builds products and things like that, I'm sure you guys can agree that we have to be flexible with the techniques that we are trying to use, but steadfast in the goals that we want to provide value with. So as long as the goal is interoperability, it could be an IBC bridge, right? Like it could be a proof of burn, right? Like it could be so many different ways. But I think we're going to find it because it's very important to us. And I really think that right now we have more abilities than just creating the tech stack. We have the ability to create the economic stack. And I would say that money is the API for humans, right? Like you can call on them, you can talk about the money. You can't control an API from signals and JSON data, but it does help to have it. And I think that right now all of our developers have found out that we can help program money, which helps program communities. And I think that that's probably going to be the largest thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, when it comes to metaverses and how they can integrate blockchain and a variety of different blockchains and the data that are stored within the blockchains, I think that all I'll just say is that there's a lot of opportunity for these platforms and metaverses to utilize data, user data and other type of information, not just to verify users on a platform without having to do a login, for example. You could have basically a single login through really any platform, but also to migrate your rewards, your history of utilizing these different platforms, and then basically enabling a really rich data set for different organizations to create even more inspiring experiences. And again, like this type of data ultimately is owned by the individual, and they get to choose what sort of data they want to be able to share with these platforms. And that's a really big theme that we're working on at GamerJab as well.
Thanks, and I guess my thoughts on interoperability is I'm not quite sure what the final phase will be, but if you look at where blockchains are today, I think they're very analogous to operating systems in the early days of the internet. You have Linux, better for some, Windows, better for some, and Mac OS, better for others, and different flavors of each, and different, I think you could, say those are forks, if you will, of like Red Hat or something. So I think that's kind of where it'll end up. Building off something you said, which is ownership of data, and talking a little bit about the security behind that. People owning their data has different levels of security. Owning your own private key, it's not for everybody. Where do you see that ending up? And then something else you mentioned about is you can choose which data you share to the application you're on, but this is all public data. And so it can be mined, of course, whether you allow the application to see it or not. So very interested to get your take on that and yours as well.
That's a great question. I don't know everything, and I think ultimately it's up to the, I think generally individuals should have the power, and that is something that is really important that we see with really a lot of these tools and organizations. Is about giving the power to the developers, giving the power to the individuals to make decisions on how that data is used across different platforms. And I think that is important. With that said, of course, there has to be more information and more tooling that makes people comfortable with sharing certain data, and also for these NFTs and these different projects that store data associated with an NFT on the blockchain, there will be a given set of standards, I believe, that will arise that will enable all these other platforms and dApps and metaverses to utilize that data in useful ways. But I do think that the opportunities are vast, and it really depends. It's like a question of like whether you should be anonymous on a metaverse platform or not. And I think, honestly, I think that there's benefits to both. It's benefits to demonstrate that you are who you are, say you are. There's also benefits to being semi-anonymous and also benefits to being anonymous. And these type of experiences are very diverse and really exciting.
So when I think of user data, I think of their journey and experience online. And I see the trend in Web3 where your journey and experience online now has immense economic value. So if you had a journey and experience where you bought a .ens domain, then you would be able to get airdrops and all of these things. And I think that humans and other users are going to want their data to be valuable. I think they're going to want to be known that they bought an NFT before you did. They're going to want to be known that they joined a certain area of the metaverse before others, right? And I think that third parties or even the metaverse itself is going to reward people for their experience and for what they do online. And I think that's a sharp difference from exploiting data and harvesting data that Web 2 is doing. And I'm not saying that that isn't going to occur in Web 3 as well. Obviously, most blockchains are public. You can scrape a lot of the transactions, and a lot of people are making a lot of money following different wallets, which I think is like a pseudo-anonymity, right? I'm anonymous, but my wallet isn't. My wallet has a history of owning certain things, and people, like, some wallets are very famous. So I think that that's really going to be what we're going to do with data. Is it's going to be far more of a going to be a far more complicated relationship than what we currently have, where we're like, oh no, our data should be private, and like no one should really know about it. Whereas now in Web3, we're going to be like, wait a second, does our data mean something to the community? Will other people respect it? Will they say, oh wait, this guy has a Bored Ape, and he bought it, not a Bored Ape that he bought last week, but he bought a Bored Ape on the transaction the day they came out, right? Like, all of these things is your data points, and I believe that like it's just going to shift a little bit towards proving to the community what your journey was and what your experience can be.
And I think I agree very much with that, which is that the history is very important, and we don't really have that today. It's in an immutable and transactional and a public record, which is going to be very important. And I think from the security side, I think where you put your data is going to be a choice by the user, and I don't think necessarily one model is better than the other, but I think the choice, giving that to the users, is really what this movement is all about, and why I think applications that force you to download MetaMask is a step in the right direction, where they want users to own their data, but it's not really encapsulating of the average user that doesn't quite know how to do that. And so providing them both options, one that they may know, one that they may not and can learn about, is very valuable.
So I have a question for the panel here is, what sort of design decisions or UX have you experienced that are that's different in the metaverse, perhaps experiments that you guys are trying with design for end users compared to typical Web 2 based platforms?
Yeah, so I've been working with metaverses well in the Web 2. I helped Comic-Con with their metaverse when COVID first hit, and I helped with the near panel talks in the metaverse prior to that. And then we had no Web3 things, but I will say that the UX and UI and designing it was very different from how we usually design a normal website. First off, you don't really overload your users with paid promotions and logos as much as you would on a normal website or even a t-shirt or what have you, right? Because you have 360 degrees of communication with your users. And you can be able to create scenarios where your sponsors or the B2B connections that you have will be satisfied with their representation in the metaverse, at the same time providing a very enjoyable design and experience for your users. So I would say that the metaverse provides a whole lot more communication, and with that comes a whole lot more design and thought through. We're thinking through the color palettes, we're thinking through the fauna, all of the different things, where we never would really think about that with a normal app or a normal website.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think it all comes down to, I guess I'll talk quickly about what Stardust is doing. Stardust is not, I think, your typical SDK, like you may see with a Sequence or a Vently or Taurus, some other SDKs that allow people to build a social login on top of games, which is what we allow game developers to do. We're actually more of a managed wallet system, so think of a backend similar to Coinbase as applied on top of games, giving users that ability to earn or get NFTs in game, but yet not having to manage their private key or anything like that. And the reason we opted for that is really comes down to games at scale, especially on mobile, are all cost per acquisition versus LTVs. And so if you think every extra button typically that you'd click on an app is about 10% drop off, you can imagine if you have 5 buttons, right? You have like 0.9, n minus 1, basically conversion rate to something that has no buttons. And so from that perspective, I think it's important from a UX perspective, if you guys really want to onboard massive amounts of users, you have to have the least amount of buttons possible while giving the user the highest security possible. And that's why Stardust has opted toward a model that really allows people to social login, but still giving them the ability to offboard if they so choose.
Yeah, great points made. I would just say that the other perspective around UX design, I think, provides a huge opportunity for human psychology, especially in 3D interfaces, because how people interact in the 3D world, sometimes you actually feel nervous. You actually feel certain emotions as if you're attending a live event. And I think that that provides a lot of opportunity and research on how to create better user experiences based on human psychology and how they move around, what they're looking for, how to give them the right and relevant content, how to show them maybe the right branding, advertisements within a metaverse environment. And I think this is a really exciting period where we can learn a lot about how humans can interact within a 3D environment.
So first off, I really love Stardust, and I think you guys made an amazing metaverse for ETH Denver. So I'd love to ask you guys, what goes through your mind when you're thinking of what you can provide to the gamer community or your user base?
Interesting. So I think the biggest thing when I started, I've been doing Stardust for about a little over 4 years now. Actually, the first iteration of our website was late 2017. The biggest thing for me was how to give all of the users and the developers the benefits of blockchain with none of the cost. And that's why I think finding a tech stack that is a rip and replace to what a game developer is using today, just with a set of APIs, but also for players so that they gain all of the benefits of NFTs and their interoperability and different DeFi concepts that we can put in game directly through a REST API endpoint. That's extremely important, and that's how I think the value accrual will be for users. I think education is a very, very expensive thing to do over time, whether it's in user drop-off, whether it's an ad dollar spend, et cetera. And so I think it's on us, and something we've tried to do at Stardust is allow developers to encapsulate 100% of the user base that they have now, but while also teaching them about what the future is going to hold, and hopefully over time, maybe offboarding them into an economic model that is more decentralized than what they have today.
I would just say simply, when it comes to comparing like Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, honestly, there are so many definitions of what Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 represents. I've heard it's basically you could read, write, own. I've heard that many times, owning within the Web 3 environment. But I also think that it is more than that. I think that Web 1 was really about information, right? You have access to a lot of information online. Web 2 was about really about connectivity, but in a shallow level, because we see a lot of social applications that popped up that focused a lot on likes, a lot on follows, a lot on these sort of metrics that give rise to enabling a influencer culture within the world right now. And I think Web3 provides a layer above that, now how can we enable better connections between people? How can we actually enable people from one region to another to develop a better bond, a better experience with each other, with the brands associated within these metaverses? And that's a philosophy that we believe in GamerJive, and I think is an important aspect beyond ownership as it relates to the blockchain.
So I guess last question before we take questions from the audience. So please, so we don't sit up here awkwardly, just think of some questions before we all go around one more time. Love to ask to the panel, what is something you guys think your product does best? And what is something that you think is your product needs to, maybe, something that could improve upon, or what you're continually improving upon over the next, 6, 12 months?
There's really two key themes that we're really focused on. Number one, how can we enable people to develop better connections with each other and with brands within a metaverse-like environment? And this is a repeat of generally what I said before. And that human connection is really important. And I think there's going to be a lot of research we have to do, a lot of new ways to enable people to find others and connect with them in meaningful ways. The second component that's really important for us is accessibility. How can we enable as many people to access such experiences, no matter where they are, no matter really what their situation is? Of course, you would have to be connected to the internet, but could we make an accessible solution that's as easy as Google Meet, or really accessing any Web 2 application? How can you make that accessibility the same within the Web 3 application? And I think that is a really important way to transcend this more of a culture that we have, the subculture, into something that the majority of people would be able to use and find value with.
So what do we do best and what we would like to improve? Awesome. So I think what we do best is our core mission. We're focused on, I hate the term starving artist, and I honestly believe the Web3 revolution is going to include artists, because we're able, like I said earlier, to set up the economic stack in our programs. So what we did at the Nearverse is that we have artists built in every transaction and every economic stack that we have. Every time that you buy land in the Nearverse, 20% of it goes to an artist guild. And we also have a lot of DeFi tools, because Near Protocol is really great at offering DeFi, and we have an app chain from Octopus Networks. But with these tools, instead of the user getting the APY every day, we're able to do what's called creative staking, where the artist gets the APY every day, and she's able to come to your property and build out more art on your land, more buildings, make it higher, and you're able to see that growth happen on your NFT. And at the end of the day, the artist, she gets paid, she's involved in the economic stack. You end up with a more valuable NFT, so it's not just out of the goodness of your heart. And that's what I think we do best. It's really trying to think out tokenomics that include the users that may not have been included before. Because I don't think WAGME necessarily means that like the top people or like every single person's gonna make it. What I really think it means is that the people who weren't gonna make it in the old methodologies and the old Web 2.0 will now have the greatest opportunity to make it of all time. And we wanna be able to allow for that. Something that we feel like we need to improve on is more accessibility. A lot of our metaverses require the users to download software. A lot of our metaverses require users to own crypto. All of these things are limiting our onboarding. So what we're really trying to do and trying to figure out is how we can tap Web 2.0 communities and bring them into Web 3.0. Because Decentraland may have 10,000 monthly active users, but anyone from the video game space will tell you that an investor won't even talk to you unless you have 10 to 15,000 monthly active users. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I
Give
guess
him a hand. That was a little louder than that. Come on. All right. Thank you, guys. That was an amazing, amazing topic. So now we're going to shift gears to the merging of DeFi and Dows. Exit by the bar if you're exiting. You guys can talk to each other if you want to talk to the gentleman through the bar or through this right here, through this door. Anybody want to talk to everyone? What time is it? 6:10. Here we go. I'm Jose Caballero again. I'm your MC for the evening. It is 6:10, and we're going to be shifting gears to the merging of DeFi and Dows. Where has this union gone? What are the pain points, and how can we improve? Moderated by Andrew Thurman with Matthias Hirschman from Reef and Dane Lund from Alliance. Big hand of applause. Come on, do it. Don't make me applaud too.
Thanks, guys. I can tell the crowd is the same place I am. I just want to go to bed. I might lose my voice in real time here, but we'll get through it. Talking about the merger of DeFi and DAOs, it's been high-key a spicy couple of weeks in DAO land. A lot of, at least one successful governance attack, maybe more depending on how you define governance attacks. It's an exciting time. So we're going to dive right in, but two very smart people here to talk about it with us today. Let's go down the line. Introduce yourselves, please.
Sure. So my name's Dane Lund. So I'm Dane Lund. I'm with Alliance. I'm our DAO architect. So I'm DAOs all day. So I'm very excited to talk about this topic.
Hi, I'm Matthias Hirschman, and I come from RiffChain. I'm lead developer, so I'm more off topic, but I have an overview.
Yeah, we'll always take a layer one dev whenever we can get one, though. That's just fine by us. So getting right in, it seems to me that the current state of DAO tooling is really insufficient for the amount of value that DAOs currently secure. If you take, DeFi, total TVL, the market cap of governance tokens, and the treasuries that these projects control, you're, in striking distance of $500 billion. Nonetheless, these are still incredibly rudimentary, very simple. Hypothetically, that makes them more robust, but at times it's like a whole lot of value being secured by kind of like sticks and crayons sort of contracts. In your view, am I right in that estimation? Like, what is the current state of what you can do with a DAO, and is it sufficient to handle where we've gotten with DeFi?
So I think we've come a long way from the DAO, right? So if you think about governance, for instance, discourse is a huge improvement from having curators kind of elevate votes. I think where we need more work is treasury management. So one of the biggest things that I think about is like, a lot of times the keys, the private keys have to be like managed by somebody. There's not a lot of privacy there. Like there are new kind of tooling mechanisms that are being built with, ZK enablement that are allowing for privacy there, but we're not quite there yet. It's not deployed. I think we need to think a lot about privacy. We definitely have to think about governance hacks. So, every time we think we've gotten an improvement, when we have Urine 2.0 or whatever, we run into a wall. So that's actually good. We then iterate and get better, but we certainly need better tooling, and we see a proliferation of tooling, development, but we need a lot more to continue to kind of react to the problems that we're finding.
Yeah, I mean, these are the things that are very new, and they're still in development, and we're dealing with so big amounts that when something happens, it's really a big tragedy, and things need to be developed over time. Usually, the best way is to go small and grow, but here there's like so much attention and so much will to engage other people that, so much engagement with the funding and everything, that when it happens, it's just a mess. Yeah.
Agreed. Well, let's talk about a few examples of those messes. Last week, can't remember the name of the protocol, only 6 figures market cap, but a delegate proposed a vote to transfer to themselves control of the token contract, minted infinite tokens, and tanked the price. That project's now dead. A clear example of a governance attack. Likewise, over the past month or so, Justin Sun has been taking out massive loans for governance tokens of popular DeFi protocols, and in Aave successfully passed the proposal for Aave to have a deployment on Tron, and in MakerDAO and Compound unsuccessfully attempted to have a stablecoin that he's linked to added as collateral. Whether or not Justin Sun's instances can be called a governance attack is kind of an interesting question to get into to the extent that, everybody's allowed to take out loans. It was within the rules of the system, right? But the question is then need to ask, should it be permitted? Anyway, I got a lot of shit from his PR person for calling it a governance attack, so maybe it's not, maybe it is. But these things can happen, and it seems like everybody's talking 2022 is going to be the year of the DAO, but so far it's shaping up to be the year of the DAO as an attack vector that drains a whole lot of money. Are we going to see more of that? How quickly can the development of this tooling sort of outstrip, these systems as an attack vector?
So I think it's a great point, and it's really an arms race. So I think this really points out the importance of architecting governance. So if we go to like malicious attacks, there's an element of innovation with Governor Bravo, for instance, where there's kind of a cooling off period before deployment of a successful vote. But I actually think you could go to something like bifurcating, votes that deploy money to a specific token holder versus, general deployments that are, broadly governance. And then if you had a separate timeline, for instance, it was longer to have a self-interested kind of implementation. If there was an emergency situation and you had an emergency, committee like Aave does, like a fair number of the developed DeFi protocols do, they can actually react faster. I think the other thing is there's a huge problem with voter apathy, and that's actually a governance issue, because if you don't construct a system that promotes people to actually participate, you end up with a circumstance where there's like a Discord proposal that gets elevated and somebody mints themselves tokens. So that's really problematic. I mean, more broadly, we also have to think about standards and rules, right? So what is self-interested? And if we talk about the Tron, episode, it's kind of a standards versus rules issue. I mean, he might have played by the rules of the game, but if you had some standards that applied that described what a self-interested vote is so that you could pick up on it and maybe rectify, that would be a better situation. But it definitely points out needs for innovation on governance.
Yeah, these are the forefronts, like DAOs are the forefronts of social evolution, and the stakes are high, but it's basically the price of the evolution, right? It's unfortunate that this gets so much attention and it's so much funding. So when it gets wrong, it hurts. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that voter apathy point that you brought up. Because voter apathy isn't just a sort of PR black eye for the industry. It is, in fact, a security issue. A lot of the most important votes pass with just a few dozen addresses voting one way or another, and only a fraction of a governance token circulating supply. And so it seems to me that in order to prevent governance attacks episodes, you need to encourage more participation, because that inherently strengthens the system. So do we do that with, bribes? Do we try and, give crypto economic incentives for people to participate? Or is this an issue where these are public goods and people should be getting up off their ass and trying to support them?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I think there are two things we got to think about. One is defining participation. So you could imagine that there are seasons of heavy participation by the entire DAO, and that might mean delegating some powers, making sure you're sorting through who's doing a good job within a committee structure or not, and then there's also the rewards issue. I think you definitely want to incentivize voting, whatever function that the DAO is supposed to serve, actions that support that. That could be in a social DAO actually doing things and building things. That could be in a protocol deploying things. But you want to have a system that selects for the people who are actually going to, put in effort and actually increase the value of, the pool by virtue of their efforts. And I think that's a difficult thing. I think that the biggest part, though, is we don't define participation. So then, if you don't know what participation is, you don't know how to participate, you end up just, either sitting on a stake and hoping that it goes well, or moving on. And that leads to the circumstances you're talking about where 5% of people vote, or you have, you have clustered votes where 95% of the people vote the same thing, or the token holders. these are problems that you definitely need to solve with incentives and clear messaging about what participation is.
I mean, here is the great thing that it's very transparent and it rewards the actions. And over time, we're going to find out how to how to measure the right actions. And there's no much room for politics. It's going to be just very efficient, and I think it's going to be great, right?
I like that. If we can get rid of the social layer, maybe that's a good thing. I like that a lot. Talk to me about actually architecting these systems, though. It seems to me that DAOs face a similar trilemma that blockchains do. You know, you can only optimize for so many things. Perhaps the most famous example of this we've seen recently is with Wonderland. Danielle Sestigali and Michael Patron, convicted felon. Turns out that you can move very quickly, you can raise a large treasury, and you can pursue very complex yield-bearing strategies with that treasury as long as you're a multi-sig and you're effectively centralized. So we know that certain structures work better for certain things, but when we're talking about DeFi and the needs of a community-owned protocol, what particular things should you optimize for, and which axes on the trilemma should you aim at?
Yeah, so if we're talking about DeFi, I think that one of the virtues of DeFi is you can actually decentralize fairly quickly if you want to. Decentralization is really important, for a variety of reasons. Legal, for having a lack of the ability to perform governance attacks by or 51% attacks. But I think you're right. There is an optimization problem. You could optimize for governance, but that would probably require a lot more activity. So then that might compete with decentralization. I think that the things we need to think about right now, though, are security, and we need to think about the participation governance element. Going from there, we can secure our systems, make sure they're functioning well, and then start to optimize for other things. So I think if you think about the trade-offs as static in time and they're one relative to the other, that's problematic. But if you think about let's secure 1, 2, and then work on 3, I think you end up working through it better. But it is a matter of sequencing and recognizing the trade-offs.
Yeah, and over time we're gonna get like the perfect structures for particular things. So for now, it's not very optimized for any particular thing. It's more like a general or bigger changes. But over time, we're gonna see like very focused organization, or like it's like blockchain. You can't have the decentralization in very fast block times. I mean, you have to pick one, and here it's gonna be the same, right?
Let's pivot a little bit to talk about another potential weak point in DeFi DAOs. I think after the publication of the SEC's DAO report, they said that had the DAO not collapsed in 2016, they would have pursued some kind of enforcement in 2017. It died on its own, so they didn't have to. But this is a regulatory body that's actually very familiar with DAO structures, and in particular with DAOs managing treasuries. It seems to me that DAOs aren't thinking hard enough about the kinds of legal liabilities that might come with just an average Joe token holder, not even somebody who's contributing meaningfully to the protocol, voting on a treasury distribution. There might be legal liabilities there. What kinds of things can we do with legal wrappers to insulate users and developers from these potential regulatory risks?
Great question. What I'd say is I want to separate out some of the securities parts, because this is generally important from a legal perspective, I think, as well. So if you have a bunch of people in the United States doing something collectively and there's no title, no form to it, they're a general partnership. Each person has kind of plenary liability for whatever happens. So if you have deep pockets, you might find a plaintiff's firm that comes after you. So you definitely, I think you need to find a legal wrapper of some sort. Now, what a legal wrapper is a very tough question. It could be that there's kind of a legal organization that kind of represents the actions and takes direction, or it could be that the entire DAO is subsumed in a legal structure. But, I think Wyoming's done a fairly good job of putting out the DAO LLC. It's problematic because it's also in the US regulatory kind of landscape. But then you can also look to some other jurisdictions that are being very thoughtful about how to set up foundations, for instance. You can look to Switzerland, Liechtenstein, the Cayman. But you definitely need to think about how the nexus of your DAO structure on chain relates to the legal world, because to date DAOs aren't nation states. They may become them in the future, but they are not powerful enough to have their own independent governance system. They are still part of the legal system. So it's really important to find your legal wrapper or representation.
I love the idea of a DAO having a standing military, by the way. Let's get to that weird future. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, I mean, like, these are very new things, and probably when they grow up, we're going to need to change the laws as well. And I mean, hopefully they grow up enough so that we have less politics in our government and in, working of the government. It's going to be one big DAO that everyone can contribute to.
Who was it? Somebody said, it's weird. We only change the multi-sig for who has the nuclear codes every 4 years. It's bizarre. We got to rework that system, guys. Let's linger here a little bit more. You guys have both worked in DeFi and DAO development. What's the mood in the office when it comes to these regulatory risks? I'm curious to what degree, the regulatory ambiguity and, this lending platform that got a $100 million fine, but also was apparently approved to move forward with its product. It's such a mixed bag. What's it like sort of working under this cloud, and to what degree do teams, when they're developing, feel this palpable risk hanging over them?
Yeah, so at first it's something to be taken very seriously, and it takes a lot of thought. So I think of DAO building as something that's best done slowly, methodically, and very thoughtfully. But I also think that if we're thinking about the United States, there needs to be some leadership, probably on the legislative side. Difficult to do because of gridlock, but we now do have some candidates that are more or less single-issue candidates. I mean, you look at Matt West; he's really pushing, his pro-blockchain stance. I think that there's an issue with the integration of the regulatory bodies where there's not clear distribution of authority. There's certainly jockeying for it, but it's really a legislative problem. Somebody needs to clarify, what is in charge of regulating each aspect. I would advocate that you might even want a self-regulatory organization of people who actually understand what's going on DeFi, who are serious about promoting things like non-fraudulent behavior and making sure that people aren't just creating windfalls for themselves. So it's got to come from the industry too. Otherwise, what you're going to see, and we see this a lot, people thrive offshore. There are a lot of, if you think of countries like Singapore, they're really putting forward pro-crypto policy, and they're going to reap the rewards. So I also see it as somewhat of an economic existential problem for jurisdictions that aren't thinking about how to promote this.
Yeah, this field is moving very fast, and the jurisdictions are not following up. They're like staying behind. So probably those countries that can adapt very quickly will get the benefits and will grow in the future even more, or have a bigger share of the market.
Got it. Finally, I want to talk about the costs associated with DAOs. In addition to being rudimentary contracts, they're often kind of very expensive. And there are huge security trade-offs associated with using snapshot or signal voting. Is the solution we just go to more efficient L1s that manage treasuries somehow on Ethereum? Like, how do we architect away the problem and the barrier to, interacting with these systems from a gas cost perspective?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because it brings together a lot of what we were talking about. It's inhibiting better tooling, and it's inhibiting better governance. So, if you think about deploying on Ethereum, even if you thought, okay, our token holders can afford, the gas cost of exchange, what you don't think about is, okay, well, what if you wanted to have a sub-DAO or a working committee that had a tokenized stream and its own multi-sig? Well, all of a sudden, you're actually talking about very costly governance. And so there are some people who are thinking very thoughtfully about the integration between the L1 as your base layer, and then L2s for specific governance actions, I tend to think that's our best solution right now. And then there are people who are moving to less expensive L1s. That is difficult though, because then you end up with situations where you might not attract enough people to think about governance very thoughtfully. You might not be getting the best devs. I think though that there are a lot of devs that are thinking very seriously about this, and it's something that the governance thinkers and the developers have to coordinate on very closely.
Yeah, we have a project, DeFi project on the Ethereum first, and the fees are so high that only the big ones can afford those transactions, and that's why we started the layer 1 low fee blockchain. So it really solves the problem, and solves the problem for DeFi and for this Dows, because it's much easier and it's more publicly accessible. So anyone can do even small transactions or with small funds. So it opens up the field for new possibilities, right?
Awesome. Well, that's all I had for our panelists. Let's take a second, though. Show the crowd, what are you guys working on in DeFi and DAOs? How are you guys pushing this space forward?
Yeah, so at Alliance, we really run a premier accelerator focused on all of Web3. Very enthusiastic about what's going on with our cohorts. We're on cohort number 7. We have some that are putting together really interesting, launching platforms for DAOs. We've got Super DAO, which I'm very excited about. And then we have others who are building very bespoke integrations, things like the Carta for DAOs. And so I'm very optimistic about it. But at Alliance, we're really founder-focused in all of Web3. And I think we're just seeing amazing and brilliant things coming out of our cohorts.
So as a Reef Chain, we have our grants program, and we're super excited. I was watching the talks around here, and it's very nice to see the charity projects and environment projects, and it's amazing, and we would like to participate in that and support those. So it's great stuff to come.
Awesome. So yeah, check out Alliance and check out the Reef Chain grants program. Any questions from the crowd? Good question. It seems like, who is the responsible party for making sure that there's a sane legislation coming down the pipe, yeah? I think, DeFi has actually been doing pretty well on this front. The genesis of the Blockchain Association out of a Uniswap grant, the grant itself was somewhat controversial, but, that's a sign that, these organizations are really pushing forward. Then you have, candidates like Matt West, who's being supported now by decentralized political action committees, HODL PAC, for instance. It seems like that infrastructure for successfully lobbying is starting to come together. I'm curious, what are your guys' view on how we're doing on telling the boomers what we're about?
So I definitely think putting aside the moral who should, if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it, and we're the most incentivized to. So I think at every point that we have the opportunity to engage in a respectful and very thoughtful manner on what regulations work, we should. There are a lot of great organizations I work with. Global DCA, I think they're great. Every chance that one of us has to speak to a legislator, talk about the specifics, if they'll give us the time, that's great. Otherwise, I think we need to write a lot about it, and we need to find a platform. And we do have good candidates. We need a lot more. So I think it's participation.
I don't have experience in this.
Okay. Well, I think that's it then. We really appreciate your time, and thanks to the panelists for joining us.
Big hand of applause. Awesome, gentlemen. Thank you.